Top of the evening, everyone, and welcome to this current installment of Truth Noir. We're here with some more way out stuff to talk about, and I'm here with, I think, still the record holder for most frequent guest host, Adam Papigan.
Great to be here. Thank you very much, John.
How's it going, buddy? Good to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You know, I was, as time has gone by, we've been doing more and more shows, and I didn't realize that it's been almost 2 months since you've been on here, man. So you owe us some stories. What have you?
The world is still here. I'm amazed.
Yeah, you know, after our predictions for September, I was a little worried, but you know, fortunately, that was all bullshit, or at least got delayed by the you know, cosmic forces of good. You know, maybe what I was thinking is that all of those predictions were only valid for the previous universe that we were in, where you know, Berenstein Bears books are still spelled with the E-I-N at the end.
Did we get to the bottom of that one?
No, not yet. But you know, regardless, I'm glad the world still exists, so that you know, so we could do another show together, man. It's always cool having you on.
What a
So
world.
yeah, man, what have you been up to the last couple months? If you care to divulge that information.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Working on some new Del Talk Show stuff,
Excellent.
which will be unveiled very soon. Of course, Backstage Live.
Very cool.
You remember that? And
I kind of remember that.
and I want to do a show with animals.
Very cool. On the drone box stage, or
No, my own.
oh, okay.
Like stock footage and stuff. It's just, I was watching the antenna. I was watching like the Spanish network.
Uh-huh.
There's a show about otters, and I don't even speak Spanish, but I was just watching it because there were otters on it.
Yeah,
Just swimming around, and I was like, oh, I could do this. Just the thing. Just everyone likes animals.
yeah, and especially cute animals. You know, you can just film them for hours, and
Everybody likes them.
people will watch. Yeah, I dig that, man. Well, yeah, and also we'll you know, put out there that for anyone who doesn't know, the Del Talk Show has its own channel on YouTube that is easily accessible if you just type in the Del Talk Show, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And yeah, good stuff, quality material put together by Adam for quite a while now. How long have you been doing that show?
Oh, since 2004.
2004. Wow. So yeah, well, that's over a decade.
Yeah.
So yeah, right on, you guys. Check it out. Unfortunately, Adam, as always occurs on the show, the it's not all sunshine and rainbows here like it is on the you know, on the Del Talk Show. The thing I wanted to talk about today is false flag events, and we kind of briefly sort of introduced and defined the term in previous episodes, but I just keep hearing more and more and more stuff that you know, on the news and various media outlets that sort of contains the markers of false flag events, and so I wanted to go over it again, and also go through historically some things that have actually happened that are now admitted false flags as proven by documents that have become unclassified and all of this stuff. So,
For those of us who don't know, what exactly is a false flag?
a false flag, as it turns out, they've been going on for a very long time, and where the term comes from is when naval vessels would carry out military actions covertly, and what they would do is they would fly the flag of a foreign army. So if you're you know, the British fleet, and if you want to stir up some muck with the Spaniards, your British ship will fly a Spanish flag and then attack other British ships, or it'll attack ships from a third country's army for the purpose of inciting you know, zeal against another country, so that even though this army didn't, or navy didn't do anything to you, Now you have two nations that want to go to war with that country because you fired cannons at, a Spanish ship. You were British, but you were maybe, say, flying the French flag. Now, all those countries are going to want to go to war with France because you tell the Spaniards and the Brits, man, this French ship flying a French flag bombed, a Spanish vessel. Isn't that terrible? And of course, people will say, well, yes, that's awful. We should go do something horrible to the French. So this is well documented. It is actually, it was banned by the Geneva Convention, at least officially, because it's just insightful against, as it turns out, people that have done nothing to you. And so, in fact, the oldest one of these that I've found was from the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64. And it's the fire that is remembered from the phrase "Nero fiddled while Rome burned." That's a pretty common phrase that no one knows what it means. Well, and of course, this is a photograph from the Great Fire of Rome. Yeah, so I want to make sure I get my names right here. So the writings that are still existent from the Roman consul Cassius Dio and historian Suetonius reported this fire as arson that was perpetrated by the government of Rome. But what it resulted in and who it was blamed on was Christian rebels, because their burgeoning Christian faith was gaining a lot of momentum, and it was starting to interfere with the state church of Rome. And so they blamed this fire that they had set themselves on the Christians, and then used that as an excuse to execute a bunch of Christians and imprison them. And so
why wouldn't they just arrest the Christians, and why would they need to start the fire?
Well,
couldn't they just go after the Christians?
It's one of those things, and it's kind of more apropos now, since we have these notions of democracy and and the like. But the Romans didn't want to anger any of their citizenry that it was like, well, maybe we should just live in peace with everyone. They wanted to make sure that everyone in Rome would have a reason to support what they were doing afterwards. And so they burnt down half of their city. In fact, it was more than half of the city. I think out of 14 districts of Rome, there were 10 that completely burnt to the ground. So it was actually a pretty horrific event. And so, yeah, a bunch of Christians got killed for it, who of course had nothing to do with it, and problem solved, right? So it turns out these things have been going on probably way before, and certainly since then. So anyone who is of the opinion that well, surely these things don't still happen. That was the Roman Empire, and we're a much more civilized society these days. Turns out, unfortunately, no, we're not, guys, because there's other stuff that I've found that is pretty disturbing. Among the evidence that has come out in recent times are evidence and testimony from the Nuremberg trials. And of course, this was the hearings that took place, the tribunals that were held against the Nazis after World War II. And during that time, none other than Hermann Goering himself, who we've talked about and quoted a few other times in the past on this show, he testified that he himself ordered the bombing of the Reichstag. This was a little bit before World War II, because he wouldn't admit to a lot of stuff during World War II, but they asked him other questions. And he said, yeah, that he ordered the bombing of the German Parliament building. as an excuse to lock up all of the communists who were in opposition to them. So he did this thing, and he blamed it on the communists as an excuse to imprison all of his opposition, or the opposition to the Nazi Party. And so when these things happen, we start to recognize patterns of, political agenda and misdirection in the media. And, that's kind of a bummer. Okay, so this one was really fucked up. So this was right after World War II, right? And as you might recall from World War II, the Jews of the world were just getting over having a pretty atrocious thing done to them. Many of them that were not killed in the Holocaust lost their homes, lost their property, had everything stolen from them, and so they were trying to relocate. And over the period of time between 1946 to 1948, this is from British historian Keith Jeffreys, he reported that the British government actually placed bombs and exploded over that period of time 5 ships full of Jewish refugees from various areas that were trying to make their way to Palestine to resettle. And so that was the British government doing that. And then very shortly thereafterwards, you had the Balfour Doctrine. You had, this huge fervor where the Americans and the British supported, this massive Jewish colonization. And of course, it upset the people that were already living there, that were like, okay, we didn't actually do this. And the British were never held accountable for it. And the reason why is because they set up a fake group called the Defenders of Arab Palestine. This was a group that was created by the British government, and of course this group took credit for the bombings so that of course everyone would have an excuse to go bomb the shit out of Palestine, and everything that followed from the Six-Day War to the continued conflicts that have been occurring between the Jews and the Palestinians in the area. And again, same markers, same kind of political engagement afterwards. Operation Northwoods was an attempted false flag. It didn't happen, fortunately, because it probably would have started World War III in the 60s and it would have been a horrible mess. But it was proposed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff of America to incite a war with Cuba by blowing up airplanes full of American college students. Also, having people disguised as Cuban nationals holding, violent protests in front of Guantanamo Bay and on American soil for the exact same purposes. And so, just more fuel to the fire that this stuff has been going on since then. And, it kind of makes you think, are there any events that have been happening recently? So I have some guidelines of how to spot a false flag. And it's actually a really good sort of handbook. Not really handbook, it's a single page. And there's certainly more identifiers for false flags, but here's some of them. We'll read them out loud. There's a thing that happens that's terrible and it gains immediate national news coverage, like blanket news coverage that you can't avoid. It's on all of the network channels, it's on most of the cable channels, and it's just immediate bombardment with this, whatever horrible thing, so that you don't want to change the channel even if you could. You want to know everything you can about this horrible thing that happened on your country's soil. Now, it turns out afterwards, very shortly afterwards, that there is a political agenda. There's usually a war or a political figure that will get blamed on this, that is the justification to have them removed from power, or there's another country blamed that everyone's supposed to be like, all right, we need to go to war now. And these things, obviously they're in very intense situations. They inspire emotion and fervor in people to go like do something about it. It always turns out, oddly enough, that there were similar drills held nearby. And for example, any of the subway bombings or even 9/11, which we come to finally, was one of those, among those situations where there was maneuvers, there were war games, there were drills being conducted by the government and the military that were like simulations of this exact thing happening. Do you remember that? Or the same thing happened in 9/11, where they reported that these planes were hijacked and were flying towards the trade towers, and nothing was done about it because they thought that this was part of their preparedness drills in dealing with terrorist attacks that just happened to be going on the same day. Like, I mean, it kind of seems suspicious to me. What do you think?
No, see, reading this list, I'm having trouble identifying a false flag from just a regular disaster or catastrophe or tragedy.
Well, when things happen, like Katrina, for example, that was a thing, and they just went and dealt with it, obviously in a very shoddy way. But there wasn't really any political agenda to it. It was just a botched aid operation, and you can't really blame a hurricane on someone. Earthquakes are the same way. But I feel like terrorist attacks are very easy to steer people. After a thing happens, it's very easy to steer people in a certain way to accomplish something that they would otherwise not want you to do. What was another thing that happened after 9/11? The Patriot Act. What was that all about?
Just limiting our rights, our civil liberties.
Yeah, in a big way. Like, can't have toothpaste in your luggage anymore. Like,
yeah, what's up with that?
And well, here, let's go back. Let's see if there's some other ones that mainstream media manipulation tactics. That's another one where the people, there still wasn't a lot of fervor for going to war. At first, they were like, well, let's figure out who actually did this terrible thing. And then, do you remember when members of Congress started getting mailed anthrax in the mail?
Yeah.
And it was all the Democratic members of Congress that were getting anthrax in the mail. It's things like that that I feel separate them from other normal, disasters, or like even other attacks of acts of war against a certain group of people, because they keep doing these things. And a lot of times what I found is the media coverage in the very beginning, when the media first clicks on and they're like, hey guys, and they're reporting this terrible thing that happened, a lot of times that reporting of like the actual facts of the matter end up contradicting what ends up becoming the official story. And I think that's kind of odd, because it would seem to me that the reporting that goes on in the very beginning, right when a thing is happening, is usually the most honest and accurate. But then it turns around to, oh, well, no, it turns out that it was this way and it was these people. Why did we go bomb the shit out of Iraq when it was a Saudi living in Afghanistan that perpetrated these things, supposedly? It doesn't make sense to me. Now, there's another thing that happens. These events will get federal government attention instead of just the attention of the state government where this thing happened. And the Boston bombing is a perfect example of it. There were federal investigations involved in this, and they were very quick to, come up with a story of who was this, and well, it was Islamic extremists again, and usually when there's a school shooting or some other kind of comparable terrible thing that happens where a lot of people die, it's the state government that is involved, or even just local law enforcement that is called out to investigate and handle a certain thing. And so that's another difference that is revealed in this little meme here. Let's see, what else?
I like that logo with the skeleton.
Yeah, man, because that's the flag you fly when you're doing a false flag.
That's the pirate mixed with the American thing, mixed with guns.
Yeah, man, it's the NRA's worst nightmare. This was reported by the Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting Committee, and they are a kind of watchdog fact check group that keeps track of discrepancies in the official story versus other accounts that were reported at the time with different information that for some reason were left out of the continued reporting of an issue. And so this was in 2001, also on the heels of 9/11 itself. There was a protest at the G8 summit in Genoa, Italy, and what was reported was that, there was just a violent protest at the G8 summit, but then it came out later and the Italian officials and administrators of those specific police departments that were involved admitted that they planted Molotov cocktails and that they faked the stabbing of a police officer to justify the violent dispersal of this crowd of protesters. And it kind of, it's hard for me to not believe that when I see, pieces of shit like this. Like these people are handcuffed and, sitting down, and this piece of shit still pepper spraying them. And it seems to me like it's a warning, like don't come out and protest, or else we're gonna come handle you violently. It's a shame, and it's I see it happening more and more, all over the country, and as it turns out, all over the world. That when you have these peaceful protests that somehow turn violent, I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's probably officials that are stirring these things up in an otherwise, peaceful group of people. Obviously not all the time, but, the fact that they know that they can do this and elicit, even if they don't elicit a response, there's still people getting beat on in the streets, and then that gives them a reason to violently disperse a crowd of people. And I think it's fucked up, man.
Absolutely. False flags are a bad thing, man.
You heard it here first, folks.
We're against false flags. We don't like them.
Let's
we
see.
like the true flags.
And even those are fucked up sometimes. Speaking about flags in general, I heard that when there is a yellow fringe, like when you see a normal nation flag, like the American flag, let's say, it's just the flag. But yet when you step into a courthouse, there's that yellow fringe around the flag. Well, it turns out that, and this is according to the International Law of Flags, and which I didn't know that there was an international law of flags, but it makes sense. I mean, the naval fleets of countries have been conducting operations for hundreds of years in the modern day, and for thousands of years before that. As long as there were boats on the water that needed to be identified, they've had flags flying from them. And it turns out that internationally, that yellow fringe around a flag means that you are in a maritime vehicle, or that you are in a maritime court. And as it turns out, maritime law has no jurisdiction on land. Common law is what people are governed by on land. The citizenry of a nation are are bound by the common laws of that land. But when you step into a building, let's call it a court, where there's a fringed flag being flown, you are then subject to maritime law, like you would be subject to maritime law if you stepped onto a naval vessel. Even if you were a civilian, you're on that boat, abide by their rules. And I have to do a little bit more looking into this, but as it turns out, and what it appears to me to be, is that when you go to court for a traffic ticket, you are being tried under the jurisdiction of what they call maritime or statutory law. And that's why they're able to charge you fines for stupid shit like jaywalking, or, even though you are not violating the common law of the nation, which is basically don't murder anyone, don't steal anything, they're much more basic laws, but we're being subject to much more egregious penalties that come from law books that have no jurisdiction over us.
But if they're going to enforce the laws, it doesn't matter what some other law book says. If the fringe laws are the ones getting enforced, you got to do it.
Right, and unless people start realizing this and saying, "Hey, but wait, we're not on a boat."
We could be.
Well, I mean, if you talk about the Earth as the boat of humanity, but also the Earth doesn't have a flag, let alone one with a yellow fringe around it.
What do you think the Earth flag would look like?
I don't know, man. It would probably be. I don't know what the Earth.
I've seen it. It's blue and it's got like a picture of the Earth on it.
Well, yeah, there is that, but that was a flag that was created by humans as the Earth flag. And I think your question was more a speculation of if the Earth was a conscious being unto itself and it felt like having a flag, what would that flag look like? And I want to know, Adam, what do you think that flag would look like?
It would have all the Earth stuff, have mountains on it.
Cool.
It would have animals. It would look like somebody's wallet with the different credit cards of nature and stuff like that.
Okay. That's pretty awesome.
Canyon, an eagle, a whale, all the majestic animals. Insects too. I feel like they don't get represented
Insects also?
as other inhabitants of Earth.
They'd have to be pretty majestic insects. I mean,
An ant with its legs raised towards the sky. Or
yeah.
First two.
Yeah, ants are pretty majestic. They can lift
together.
They can lift a lot more than their own body weight, I've heard. So you think the Earth flag would just have stuff on it that the Earth has on it in general? You think it would?
In elementary school, they tell you make a collage that like represents you.
Right.
Pictures of motorcycles and boom boxes and stuff like that. Guitar.
Adam, what would your flag have on it?
TV antenna.
I know you're into your
guitar.
production. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be like the RKO logo with the tower going out.
It's like the Earth with the giant tower on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe something like that. Music notes going around it, and like some stars. Yeah, like the thing with the stars make a circle around it. I'd want that.
Like the Paramount
Yeah,
logo. Okay,
something
yeah.
like that. And stripes, definitely. Yeah.
That's pretty solid, man. Would it have a
No
yellow
stuff.
fringe around it?
On half of it.
Only on half.
Yeah.
Okay.
To say, do what you want, believe what you want. That'd be the message behind the flag.
All right, cool. I'm trying
Or
to.
maybe something solid or something that's like a red.
The red fringe.
No, just like a solid red. Burgundy could be the flag.
That would be a lot more. So to match your shirt,
Right.
to commemorate the moment when you first thought of what your flag would have on it. I like that, dude. Would it have the little
alligator,
little
too.
alligator? Cool.
A couple buttons. What about your flag, Norm?
Well, now that you got me thinking about it, I think my flag would also have a guitar on it. It would have a fried bologna sandwich with sauerkraut on it, because that's my favorite thing to eat. I don't know if I would make it the law of the land, though, that everyone would have to eat the fried bologna sandwich. I know that's kind
Just
of
respect it.
it's kind of a niche food. I wouldn't make people worship it. I would have, let's see, what else? Definitely the music notes. I like that. I would also have the moon dressed up with like sunglasses.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, because the moon would be like my hype man. And I don't know if it would be a full moon or if it would be like the crescent moon from the old McDonald's commercial that would always play Mac Tonight. Yeah. So yeah, I would definitely have that on it. What else?
That's a lot of stuff on there.
It would have,
It'd be a pretty big flag. To
you
put all
know,
this
what
stuff.
it would have also. It would have the hands of like people of different ethnicities all laid over top of each other, like they were doing a big cheer, like after the soccer game.
Diversity.
Yeah,
Flag.
all working together to make a more peaceful union. And it wouldn't have a yellow fringe on it because, as I've come to find out, the yellow fringe flag is used by people that are dicks to subject people to rules that really have nothing to do with them. So, fuck you, fringe flag. Yeah, all right, that was fun. I know it's a little early in the show, but I feel like a big, for a topic like this, where we're talking about false flag events that have happened around the world and across time, I wanted to make our fuckface of the week someone who I feel has been responsible for perpetrating a fair number of these false flags. And that person, not Herman Goering, Dick Cheney. There we go. Yeah, man.
George Bush's dad's friend.
George Bush's like puppet master. And yeah, you guys, so Dick Cheney had a hell of a lot to gain from us going to war. He wasn't just a very unfortunately misinformed person, not knowing that the one who perpetrated the attacks on America, was not a Saudi hiding out in Afghanistan. He actually, in my opinion, and as more and more evidence is coming out, it's becoming clearer and clearer that he actually, was instrumental in putting the attacks on 9/11 together himself. He's actually been convicted of war crimes in numerous countries, but unfortunately, the only world court that is deemed official is The Hague. In, I believe it's Holland. They're the official court of the UN. So if they say you're not a war criminal, you're not a war criminal. But the fact remains, him and George W. Bush have been convicted of war crimes in numerous different countries. And he also had, like I was saying, he had a lot to gain from a nation going to war, because he was the CEO of a major defense contractor that was, as the term gets thrown around a lot, but he was a bigwig at Halliburton, who magically got the contract to help rebuild Iraq after we bombed the shit out of it. Yep, there we go, folks. It's not the awesome full screen. Oh, there we go. It's becoming full screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's pulsating like that giant mole on his forehead.
Pulsating dick.
So yeah, fuck you, Dick Cheney. And I'm not even going to say like change something about yourself because I don't think you're capable of it. But yeah, Dick Cheney is responsible for the deaths of a whole lot of American soldiers. He's responsible for a whole lot of American soldiers coming back after after their tour of duty with mental and physical issues. And he's also responsible for the deaths of millions of Iraqis who, didn't do shit to us, but we went over there and we fucked them up anyways. So, yeah, here's to you, Dick Cheney. And when I say here's to you, I mean I'd like to recite some song. Oh, here, we'll just go ahead and put that back up full screen. Are you familiar with Bob Dylan?
Of course.
Do you remember the song that he wrote called "Master of War"? Mm-hmm. You remember the words to it? The last verse was, and it was sort of a general statement, and of course I mean it as a general statement now, but he said, I love it. Mm-hmm. Bob Dylan in his song "Master of War" said in the last verse of the song, very, very plainly, I hope that you die and your death will come soon, and I'll follow your casket on a pale afternoon, and I'll watch while you're lowered down into your death's bed, and I'll stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead. So Godspeed the day, Dick Cheney. You're a real piece of shit, and you've ruined a lot of people's lives, and yeah, man, there's no amount of money that you made during that war that's going to buy back your filthy, worthless soul. So, with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and resolve the evening for its best possible tidings. So yeah, add some false flags. There's a bunch more that have happened throughout history, but these were some of the more glaring examples that I wanted to bring up. These things are still going on, you guys, and if we are able to start recognizing the patterns to these things when they happen, we'll be a lot more effectively able to demand investigations into the actual occurrence itself instead of just what's being fed to us by the media in its prepackaged, pre-planned form. And it's one of those things that we can do now that we know better. So the next time something terrible happens and they immediately come on the news with the story about how, it was this people that in this country for this reason. Like, they don't fucking know that. Like, this horrible thing just happened. How do you know all that shit already? Is a question that you do well to start asking, when these things first start happening. And it'll make the world a little bit better place. Because when they know that they, can't keep getting away with it, I don't know, maybe they'll happen less than they do. So we'll go ahead and close here. I want to thank Adam Papigan once again for coming down and sharing the stage with me. And in closing, thanks for watching, and wherever you're going, get there safe. We'll catch you next time.